This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Concerns rise after South Africa's COVID-19 cases passed the 300,000 mark. Egypt embarks on producing the first locally made drug to help treat COVID-19 patients. And we'll look at how Somalia's political landscape has evolved since gaining independence 60 years ago. This is Africa Live. A warm welcome to the show. I am Peninah Karibe, also lined up this hour. China says the ban of Huawei has damaged its investment confidence in the UK. And Nigerian filmmaker leverages on technology to reach movie lovers during the coronavirus pandemic. We begin in South Africa, where COVID-19 cases have now surpassed the 300,000 mark. The country took early and decisive action to curb the spread of the virus, but in a little over 4 months since the first case was confirmed, South Africa has seen nearly 4,500 deaths. The country has tested over 2 million people so far and recorded more than 160,000 recoveries. On Sunday, President Cyril Ramaphosa reimposed an alcohol ban and a night curfew following a daily increase in cases. South Africa is now the worst hit country in Africa and among the top 10 in the world, a worrying statistic for its citizens.
I'm very, very worried. I think everyone should. It's something that is challenging a human life. It's something that can kill, that has a potential to kill maybe half of the population in the world.
They must make a plan and build some hospitals and hire more doctors. You see, not wasting money with these graves or all those stuff.
Meanwhile, Tanzania says it is winning the war against the coronavirus pandemic. The government has closed 74 out of its 85 coronavirus treatment centers across the country following claims of a significant fall in the rate of infections. CGTN's Isaac Lukando brings us more on this.
Tanzania's government has closed many of its centers designated to treat coronavirus patients across the country. It claims that the number of coronavirus patients at the centers has fallen, with some reporting 0 COVID-19 admissions in over a month. However, it is asking the public to remain cautious.
What I and my team at the ministry fear is a second wave, because we have almost controlled this disease, but there is a possibility of it spreading fast again.
The Tanzanian government last issued statistics on coronavirus cases in April. At that stage, it confirmed 509 infections as well as 21 deaths since the outbreak began. On the streets of Dar es Salaam, business is returning to normal. President John Magufuli also ordered the reopening of schools on the 29th of June after 3 months of closure.
I feel good because I am a businesswoman. Before the closures, I feared seeking and distributing my products, but when I heard about the closing of the centers, it gave me confidence. I am grateful to the Tanzanian government because I can now source my products and distribute it to my clients.
News of the closure of COVID-19 centres is comforting. It's giving us the courage to go on with our activities, business, work. The government has even agreed to reopen schools, so for us this problem has reduced.
While Tanzania has lifted its COVID-19 restrictions, the World Health Organization has raised concerns that if such measures are relaxed too quickly, COVID-19 cases could start increasing rapidly. Due to concerns about COVID-19, the US and British embassies in Tanzania have asked their personnel and families to exercise caution in their day-to-day activities. Some of their nationals have left the country. However, the government says Tanzania is safe. It has reopened its skies, allowing international flights and tourist activity to resume. The World Bank recently declared Tanzania a lower middle-income country. The government hopes the closure of its COVID-19 treatment centers will allow the country to focus more energy and resources on maintaining and growing its economy even further. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Egypt says it's in the process of producing the first locally made drug to help treat COVID-19 patients. The development, if confirmed, will be a major breakthrough for the North African country's efforts to counter the coronavirus pandemic. CGTN's Yasser Hakim has the details from Cairo.
The news came as a pleasant surprise for many Egyptians who were unaware of the ongoing experiments. Hussam Hosni, the head of the Ministry of Health Scientific Committee to combat COVID-19, is the one who made the announcement. However, he refused to give any details until all clinical tests are finalized. But some experts say this could be a breakthrough in fighting the coronavirus.
Egypt, like many countries, is trying to create its own drug. Work on the Egyptian drug began in June and it has reached an advanced level in July. It is still undergoing clinical tests, but according to the Ministry of Health, the initial results are positive.
The reactions from locals concerning the latest development have been largely positive.
For Egypt to be able to produce a completely Egyptian drug is extremely impressive, and it is a reflection of the high-quality researchers that we have here. This will serve as the fight against coronavirus and also have its economic benefits.
If Egypt really succeeds in producing a local drug, then it will be something we can all be proud of.
Egypt is the only country in the region that manufactures all the drugs it uses in local facilities. The latest is the American-made remdesivir drug that's used in treating extreme coronavirus cases.
Egypt's Eva Pharmacy company has been given the license by the American Gillette company to produce remdesivir in Egypt. They've already started producing it and it is distributed to the hospitals, not to the public or pharmacies because it has to be under medical supervision. Remdesivir is known to cure cases in only 11 days, not the normal 15 or more.
Remdesivir will be distributed to 127 countries from Egypt. Meanwhile, according to Hussam Hosni from the Ministry of Health, the new Egyptian drug is expected to be ready for use in a month's time. Hosni says he's optimistic that once the Egyptian drug is in the market, it will help eradicate the coronavirus pandemic from the North African country. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
And still in Egypt, the coronavirus lockdowns has cost many Egyptians their jobs. In turn, Egyptians have been forced to let go migrants from Africa and Asia working as domestic staff, drivers or laborers. Many of these migrants are now struggling to survive. Chaum Gono with more.
It's becoming a struggle for many Sudanese migrants in Egypt to pay their bills. Many have lost their jobs and face eviction from their homes since COVID-19 hit Egypt.
It is very difficult, very difficult. We can't bear it anymore. What can we do? This is supposed to be better than where we came from. They say that in Darfur there is war, there is rape, there is death. These things are not here, but still, our financial situation is difficult. Everything is paused. There is no work. The children are suffering from anemia, tuberculosis, and whatnot. All of this resulting from the anemia.
I have not paid rent for this house for 3 months. The landlord was okay about it, but now says that this is the last month. So by the end of next month, end of July, if I don't pay the rent for this July, I will have to leave the house. He says I have to pay.
These are just some of the many Sudanese refugees that came from the Darfur region in the 2000s following violence there. UN Migration Agency reports that tens of thousands of migrants are facing a similar predicament in Egypt.
I think we have received 500,000 requests, and we have provided regular support to 5,000. Approximately 5,000. We have a plan and a strategy for reaching 80,000, because that's the estimate we have done, which is a minimum according to what we see as the most vulnerable. Because the difficulty we face is in this circumstance, we have to prioritize people. And humanly, it's extremely difficult to say that.
The IOM estimates that a fifth of the roughly 6.3 million foreigners in Egypt are vulnerable and require help. Chom Hono, CGTN.
Confirmed COVID-19 cases in Nigeria have surged to over 34,000. The country is now depending even more on contact tracers to safeguard fragile public health systems in a pandemic that could quickly overwhelm them. Lagos has just 200 tracers for a population of 25 million, and medics say the tracers are near breaking point.
More than 12,000 cases of the coronavirus have been confirmed in Lagos State alone, any one of whom may infect many others. A team of disease hunters is on the move to track down thousands of people who have been exposed to COVID-19.
The truth is that we are all at risk now, especially with this lockdown out of the place. That is why we have to use face masks.
Typical cases involve medical staff that come in contact with a positive patient or people whose family members were infected with COVID-19. This nurse had not developed any symptoms, therefore easing the burden of finding space for her at an isolation center.
But at times, even when you have symptoms, the place is filled up. And we are like, please, just stay in your house. We are looking out for symptoms, for place. Once you get space, we'll come and pick you. So we have situations like that.
A team of medics is expected to visit each contact to determine if they have symptoms and ask them to stay at home for 14 days. If the person reports symptoms, they will be referred to test for the virus. However, the stigma associated with COVID-19 means many people are keen to avoid tracers.
Some don't give us their right address. Some, the phone number, maybe knowingly or unknowingly, because I don't really want to say people are dubious. We don't get to get across to them, so they are there. Then some, it is when they start calling out that, oh, I traveled and I'm now coughing, and I was told that if I have this symptom, I should call NCDC. So that was how we started tracing some.
Femi Adewuye is a volunteer doctor at the Infectious Disease Hospital in Yaba, where confirmed cases are kept in isolation. He had been documenting the activities in and around the center, but soon picked up his scrubs after the country's COVID cases spiraled in numbers.
We didn't know what his symptoms were, and the next day he passed on. So it's one of the, and eventually by the time the results came out, we discovered that he was also COVID positive. So it's one of those critical moments when you see someone come in and you're confused as to whether or not they are COVID-19 positive, but you know that at this level of someone being unconscious, you have to intervene.
Meanwhile, life goes on as normal, with parked buses weaving through the streets and people not observing social distancing rules. But for health workers like Fadare and Adewuye, they still have their jobs to do, no matter how risky it gets. Jane Keo, CGTN.
Further afield, the U.S. has posted a new daily record of more than 67,000 new cases, bringing the total to almost 3.5 million. Meanwhile, U.S. infectious disease expert Anthony Fauci has called the White House efforts to discredit him as bizarre and nonsense. Jagruti Dave reports.
Cases continue to surge in states like Florida, Arizona, Texas and California, which has just recently ordered the closure of indoor activities. Arizona and Texas are particularly concerned about hospital bed capacity and ICU capacity. And this comes as there's increased tensions between the White House and health officials. Just over the weekend, reports were emerging that the White House was seeking to discredit one of the US's top advisors on the coronavirus pandemic, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Dr. Fauci called some of these comments as bizarre, but this is, and the White House has attempted to roll back since on some of those comments. Over the weekend, the White House it was reported that they had leaked to certain news outlets statements that Dr. Fauci had made early on in the pandemic, which the administration officials were saying show how inaccurate Dr. Fauci ended up being. But then later on, they tried to walk back. So, on Wednesday, we saw a photograph tweeted by Mike Pence, the vice president, of Dr. Fauci at the center of the photograph during a coronavirus task force briefing. President Trump also made a statement after one of his advisors, Peter Navarro, wrote an op-ed continuing to discredit Anthony Fauci. President Trump said that he made a statement, Peter Navarro made a statement representing himself. He was speaking to reporters before leaving the White House for Atlanta. He said he shouldn't be doing that and that he has a very good relationship with Anthony.
Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has tested positive for COVID-19 a second time. He first tested positive last week. Since then, Bolsonaro has stopped working, but says he's in good health and will return to work if he tests negative. The president says he has been taking the controversial drug hydroxychloroquine, despite little scientific evidence that it works. Before testing positive, Bolsonaro had frequently mingled with crowds without wearing a mask. And in India, officials have reported more than 32,000 new cases in the last 24 hours, a record single-day rise, bringing its total to 940,000 infections, the third highest in the world. The city of Bangalore was previously spared the kind of surge seen in Mumbai and Delhi, where it's now seeing an increase as well. Our correspondent Rebecca Bundan reports from Mumbai.
Bangalore, which is known as being an IT hub, has now emerged as a new hotspot, and there are more than 20,000 confirmed coronavirus infections in the city. And as these numbers have been rising in the city and the state has decided to take strict action by enforcing a new lockdown in Bangalore. Now, the state government has said that that there could be a doubling in the number of infections in the state of Karnataka, of which Bangalore is the capital, this month. So that's why it's imposed this strict new lockdown, which is in fact even stricter than the nationwide lockdown that came into effect in India in March. So, for example, in Bangalore, this week-long lockdown, which came into effect this week, includes grocery stores only being allowed to open until 12 noon. So everybody has to do their shopping before that. People's movement is very restricted, with public transport being suspended, and places of worship are closed and so on. So really there are a lot of very tight restrictions that have come into effect in Bangalore to try to lock down. Really local businesses there are very, very worried about the impact.
You're watching Africa Live. Time for us to take a quick break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Somalia's political landscape has evolved since gaining independence 60 years ago.
Culture, the thread that holds Africa together. Every corner of the continent has its own story. From the colorful threads in Morocco to the fairy dances of Botswana. But with great strides in technology, this very culture is struggling to stay pure. CGTN Africa brings you a brand new series, a deep dive into some of Africa's most unique communities and their race to survive in the 21st century. Join us as we take an intimate look at Africa's tribes in a flux.
The The Chinese Commerce Ministry has hit back at the UK's ban on Huawei. It has called the move discriminatory and a violation of World Trade Organization rules. It says the ban has, quote, severely damaged China's investment confidence in the UK and that necessary measures will be taken to defend the legal rights of Chinese firms. The Commerce Ministry says it is also urging the UK to rethink its decisions and provide an open, fair and non-discriminatory environment for Chinese companies. China says it will take all necessary measures to safeguard its interests in response to the UK's decision. Many experts have also voiced their concerns, saying it may lead to cooling of commercial relations between the two sides. Andrew Wilson reports.
Fallout from the Huawei decision is evolving at speed. The geopolitics is widespread with many players. Without all of that, Huawei's role in UK 5G might make perfect commercial sense.
The government's given huge support to the industry and encouragement to roll out. And this is a reversal of that activity. And 5G is not like the previous generations. It's what the next industrial revolution is going to be built on. So, you know, we feel that the competitive advantage that the UK had by releasing the spectrum early and early adopters will be lost by this announcement.
Huawei UK is 20 years old. Its technology and hardware has been part of the UK system for over 15. Huawei employs 1,600 workers in the UK, tens of thousands in Europe. Alongside its telecommunications role, Huawei is a major player in UK fibre broadband, and its phones and tablets now compete for a healthy market share on the high street. Appearing at an EU think tank webinar, China's UK ambassador said Chinese businesses won't need their government to tell them what to do next.
You know, it's very disheartening. You know, the way you treat Huawei will be followed very closely by other Chinese businesses. You know, when the mutual trust was undermined, it'd be difficult for the businesses to have a confidence to have a more investment.
Will the golden era be upheld?
You don't need the government to say anything. I think the business, they can make their own conclusion.
Some suggest all this might point to a gradual cooling of commercial relations rather than a sudden separation.
I think that what that might mean in practice is essentially a slowdown of a particular flow that we've seen over the last few years and even decades, which is Chinese investment in various UK projects. HS2, which is a high-speed train project the government is very keen on, could be a good example of that.
Up till now, Huawei had big plans for the UK, as well as a $5 million research project with a London university. A new $1 billion R&D centre has been approved in Cambridge. And the company is still an integral part of the UK's other networks, 4G, 3G and 2G, crucial infrastructures on which the government has yet to rule. It's a lot of momentum to suddenly pull the brakes on. Andrew Wilson, CGTN, London.
The U.S. Department of State says Washington will impose visa restrictions on employees of certain Chinese firms, such as Huawei, accusing them of facilitating human rights violations. On Tuesday, President Donald Trump said the U.S. had convinced many countries to step away from Huawei over security risks. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has denounced Trump's statement, saying it's not about national security but political manipulation. Earlier this week, the UK announced a ban on Huawei's involvement in 5G networks in the country. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says he will visit Britain and Denmark next week to discuss the issue. To the Horn of Africa region now, where Somalia's political structure has suffered a series. Abdulaziz Bello highlights how the country's political landscape has evolved since independence.
It's been 6 decades since Somalia became a republic, reclaiming its independence from British and Italian colonialists. But the country has been struggling with political instability since then. In 1967, the country became one of few African nations to witness a peaceful transfer of power. But the promising democracy was short-lived, following the assassination of former President Abdirashid Ali Sharmake 2 years later. Mohamed Siad Barre, a powerful military officer, later took helm until 1991, when a civil war broke out that destroyed much of the country and forced him out of office. Since then, the country's political landscape has undergone a series of transformations. In 6 decades, Somalia has had at least 9 presidents, and 19 prime ministers.
Successive governments that came into power after the civil war created what we have now in one way or another. But as expected, it has its flaws. The country's politics has not been stable. Political bickering and instability has delayed state formation process. Each leader wants to have his way. Some want to bypass the constitutional powers and extend their mandate. This has been the issue.
With the collapse of the government and no functioning institutions, clan elders had the final say. They handpicked representatives in parliament through a process known as 4.5. Power was divided among 4 groups, representing the major clans. The remaining minority clans were represented by a 5th group. But this coalition was also given just half of the political representation of the other groups, hence the 0.5. Members of parliament and senators were chosen along clan lines, and it was the same for top positions including president, prime minister, speaker and cabinet ministers.
The process has been corrupt and manipulated on most occasions. It has been in place for 2 decades, and it's time to get rid of it. It was temporary, as the country was under warlords and armed factions. We need to abolish it and give power back to the people.
In 2021, the country is expected to hold its first popular vote in 5 decades, where one person gets 1 vote. More than 300 representatives will be elected to parliament. But the opposition says the election won't be successful unless the country deals with Al-Shabaab. The militant group continues to launch attacks across the country and has threatened to disrupt the process. The electoral process is, however, backed by the international donor community, including the United Nations and European Union.
Public participation at local and national level election is a step forward. Last election, 51 people elected each MP. If many people are included, we are inching closer to democratic representation. It is up to the public to demand for the popular vote and elect the leaders we want.
If stakeholders agree on the electoral process, the next parliament and senate will have the first democratically elected candidates who will pick a president to serve a 4-year term. For now, the electoral model for the upcoming elections hangs in the balance. It remains unclear whether the public will have a say in the process or risk the country sliding back to clan-based politics. Abdulaziz below CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
The Grand Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia has started filling up. It is a giant hydroelectric project built on the Blue Nile. Talks between Ethiopia with Sudan and Egypt on the issue of filling the dam became deadlocked. The dam is the centerpiece of Ethiopia's bid to become Africa's biggest power exporter, but it has raised concerns in Cairo. Egypt is worried that limited Nile waters, on which its population of more than 100 million people is almost entirely dependent, would be further restricted. So let's get the views from both of these countries. Girum Chala joins us via Skype from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and our correspondent Adel Mahroui is live for us in Egypt. So let's begin with you, Girum. What is the latest on the Grand Renaissance Dam, and has Ethiopia started filling it up as it's being reported?
Well, Peninah, a few background. About 2-3 weeks back, the African Union laid tripartite discussion between Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan was being held. And a few days back, it was concluded with no results. And before that, at the beginning, Ethiopia said, we are going to continue filling the dam with or without a successful resolution of this meeting that we are going to hold under the African Union's leadership. And that's what really happened. As it was expected, Ethiopia started filling the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. And according to the Minister of Irrigation, Water and Energy, Seleshi Bekele, he said few hours back that the 560 meters level of this grand dam is going to be held with water, and the filling should be started because this is the wet season, the rainy season, and this is a natural process that we should be holding so that the dam can start the production of the 700 megawatts of power that it was intended in the first place. So about 4.9 billion cubic meters of water is expected to be held this time around in this rainy season as expected. So yes, Ethiopia through its Minister of Water, Irrigation and Energy, has confirmed the filling has already started.
Okay, so Adel, has there been any reactions to the latest developments on this Renaissance Dam? And what should we expect in the coming days?
So Egypt and Sudan, their official stance before the news came about the filling of the reservoir is a rejection to any unilateral approach. And both countries have been insisting that the filling of the reservoir should not take place before an agreement is reached. And once there has been news that the reservoir is starting to swell up with water, Cairo has officially announced that it has asked and sent for an emergency or an urgent clarification from the Ethiopian government to understand whether the filling was happening due to the rains ongoing, or there is a deliberate filling of the reservoir from the flow of the Nile itself. And there is a big difference to Egypt from that regard. If it's just from the rain, so it's a natural filling of the reservoir instead of an intentional step to fill the reservoir beyond the agreed upon solutions. And therefore Cairo is trying to, and has not still announced that it has received the official response from the government yet, but it's also a source of a bit of concern to Cairo, as with the filling there are concerns that the water levels in Egypt would drop. But to what extent it's what the three countries are trying to work on now.
So, Girum, what are the key issues that Ethiopia want to be addressed before committing to a joint agreement with Egypt and Sudan?
So according to Ethiopian negotiators, even the Prime Minister himself, Ethiopia wants the Nile waters to be shared among its members. There are parent countries, the downstream countries, including Sudan and Egypt. The colonial agreements have no place at this time around, which, by the way, have left out Ethiopia, all in all, giving it zero when the country is the source of the Blue Nile waters itself. So the understanding here is, at this time around, any negotiation that is going to be signed between Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan should not affect, must not affect, this is according to the minister himself, Seleshu Bekele, of Water, Irrigation and Energy, should not affect Ethiopia's long-term interest and beneficiation from this Nile water. So at the moment, there is an article, according to the information that we're getting from the people who are seated in the negotiation process, that there is an article that at least Egypt wants to be included, which will affect, according to Ethiopia's stand again, which will affect Ethiopia's long-term interest, not only about the dam, long-term beneficiation interests on this Nile water. So Ethiopia is not in agreement with that article to be included in the agreement that is going to be signed. So at the moment, we can say that there is a deadlock. Ethiopia's stand seems to be very strong and firm. The dam's construction will continue. The filling will also be continuing. Our projects will also continue. But then again, the only way that Ethiopia can be included in the agreement, which is going to be signed in any near future, should include the long-term beneficiation of its people and also a mutual beneficiation, which will never exclude Ethiopia from the use of the Nile water. So this is where we are at the moment, Peninah.
And Adel, what is Egypt proposing as a way of unlocking this deadline or deadlock in the negotiations for the filling up of the dam?
So Egypt basically wants to guarantee that the flow of water, which with the Grand Ethiopia Renaissance Dam, Ethiopia will have control over, that Ethiopia will not affect the water flow into Egypt and therefore will not affect Egypt's water share, which is already insufficient. And Egypt is at a state of water poverty based on the United Nations water security line. And this is what Egypt do not want to at least become lower. So Egypt only wants to maintain the flow of water, to maintain its water share in the River Nile. And it doesn't want a leverage to happen because of the dam. And that's why it's calling for a joint management for the dam itself, so that Ethiopia cannot unilaterally, for example, withhold water from the Nile and therefore affect Sudan and Egypt. And it also wants that whatever agreement they reach will be a binding agreement, a legally binding agreement, so that in case of any violations, there will be actions that must be taken in course and a dispute, a mechanism to resolve any future disputes in the Nile management, in the Blue Nile specifically, and from the Grand Ethiopia Renaissance Dam. And if these matters are settled, Egypt will be at least comforted that no harm can actually be done, and that everything has been done within a legal framework, and therefore Ethiopia cannot harm Egypt physically, it cannot withhold water. And the country has been insisting, Cairo has been insisting, it's not against the development in Ethiopia, it's just fears that the Nile water, its share from the water from the Nile would be affected, and which will affect life in general, agriculture mainly, and therefore and drinking water as well, as the Nile is the only major freshwater source in Egypt. In general, it covers about 95% of the drinking water that the country collects every year.
All right, thank you very much for these perspectives from Egypt, Adil Mahrouri, and from Ethiopia, Gurum Chala. Thank you to the both of you. Algeria recently buried the remains of 24 anti-colonial fighters. The country received these skulls decapitated during France's colonial occupation of the North African country. The skulls had been stored for decades in a Paris museum. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moi reports.
The skulls, once viewed as war trophies by French colonial officers, were flown back to Algeria. The remains in coffins draped with the Algerian flag are seen by many as a gesture of friendship and part of efforts to reconcile the memories of the French and Algerian people.
I'm very happy, and I thank the authorities in the country that made a great effort to recover the skulls of these martyrs after 170 years of detention at a French museum.
This is a historic day for Algeria and all Algerians. I congratulate the Algerian people and Algeria for this heroic act, and I personally consider it a new Independence Day.
Among the remains were those of revolt leader Sheikh Bouziane, who was captured in 1849 by the French, shot and decapitated, and the skull of resistance leader Mohamed Lamjad Ben Abdel Malik. Algeria officially asked for their return in 2018, as well as requesting the handover of colonial archives.
I did not believe myself openly when I heard the news. I shed tears when I confirmed the news, and this work is a great honor for the Algerian state. We are very happy with the great symbolism.
France's 132 years of colonial rule in Algeria and the brutal 8-year war that ended it have left a legacy of often frosty relations between the two countries. But the return of the remains has been seen as indicating a new and positive chapter for the two countries to amend relations. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN.
You're watching Africa Live. Coming up in business news, China becomes the first major economy to grow since the start of the coronavirus pandemic.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Fresh official data shows that China became the first major economy to grow since the start of the coronavirus pandemic. The better-than-expected 3.2% expansion in the second quarter came as Chinese factories and stores continued to reopen after the lockdown triggered by the coronavirus pandemic. The improvement followed a dramatic 6.8% slump in the first 3 months that was China's worst performance since at least the mid-1960s. The growth beat some analyst expectations for an expansion of about 2.5%. China's economy slowed 1.6% in the first 6 months, but major indicators suggest it's now in recovery.
总的来看，
Generally speaking, in the first half of the year, China's economy gradually overcame the adverse impacts of the epidemic and demonstrated steady growth and gradual recovery, further highlighting its resilience and vitality. However, we should also be aware that some indicators are still in decline and the losses caused by the epidemic need to be recovered. Given the continuous spread of the epidemic globally, the huge impact on global economy, and the noticeably mounting external risks and challenges, domestic economic recovery is still under pressure.
The spokeswoman also said that the NBS remains confident about China's economic recovery during the rest of the year. Liu said that the economic fundamentals are solid. The NBS needs to fully assess the impact of the pandemic and the scale and depth of its effects on China's economy. She said that the Bureau's main task would be to stabilize the job market and China's economic performance. Liu also said that the Bureau would make sure the risks for growth can be managed and economic recovery can be achieved. Tunisia's government has fired the chief executive of its national carrier, Tunisair, over corruption allegations. As CGTN's Adnad Shawashi reports, authorities assert that the airline needs to be restructured due to mounting debt, which has left the carrier facing financial stress.
The Committee on Administrative Reform, Good Governance, Fight Against Corruption and Control of Public Financial Management at the Tunisian Parliament has dedicated 2 sessions to discuss the critical situation at its flag carrier, Tunisair. The public prosecutor has arrested 7 senior Tunisair officials following a complaint about suspicions of abuse and financial corruption at Tunisair Technics.
The arrests were made following a complaint lodged by the former transport minister and the completion of the investigations at Tunisair Techniques. It concerns a corruption case related to engine repair and maintenance. Now, the file is in the hands of the courts.
Authorities emphasized the need to improve the performance of the state-owned company through the implementation of a structural reform plan. The Prime Minister's economic advisors said the current government has no intention of privatizing Tunisair.
The government claims that it will neither sell nor privatize the company, but the state has stopped supporting Tunisair financially. It risks filing for bankruptcy. There's a huge demand from travelers, but we do not have enough resources to resume all flights or for spare parts supply. The state is absent at the moment.
With over 8,000 employees, Tunisair has one of the highest number of permanent airline staff in the world. Some experts and MPs say the national carrier must lay off at least 2,500 people in the next 3 years to sustain its business.
We are protesting and we reject any layoff. Tunisair does not have the money to equip 12 grounded planes. The state refuses to guarantee a credit line for the company, which is more than 72 years old. The mismanagement of the airline is not our responsibility.
Tunisair's activity has been suspended for 100 days, except for evacuation flights and air freight operations for medical equipment. The rescue plan for the company is based on the increase in capital. In addition, the Ministry of Finance will carry out an in-depth audit. The Ministry of Transport and Logistics has declared that revenues of national carrier Tunisair have dropped by $142 million following the COVID-19 crisis. These losses do not take into account the indirect cost of aircraft maintenance. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
South Africa's township entrepreneurs are seizing the moment with more people forced to stay at home as the country sees a peak in coronavirus cases. Retailers and delivery startups are experiencing an e-commerce boom as consumers shy away from shops during the pandemic. CGTN's Daniela Pearson has this story.
After quitting his job due to the lockdown in South Africa, Thulani Kabela saw a gap that needed to be filled. He developed an online delivery app meant to service marginalized areas while creating jobs for the unemployed. Siyeza Delivery couriers pharmacy orders, clothes, fast food and groceries.
We found a niche market where I can
locate drivers and create an app that will allow you to, at your door or at your home, sit and just order food and come through with everything. I mean, right now, our competitors, your Uber and your Mr. Delivery, they can't even reach to our township due to the restrictions and our ways. Now that we know our people also know our routes, it's easy to alert our drivers to go to everyone to their customers.
Even the largest retailers that have gone digital are experiencing a strain, with customers complaining of long waiting periods and poor service. This is despite a sharp decline in foot traffic and reliance on online platforms. Startups like Sieza Delivery were thus pushed to expand and diversify.
Sieza Delivery started as delivering food from your local Shisanyama, your Kota, your franchises like Chicken Licken where they don't have apps. But now that people have been asking for your medication, we've also extended the pharmacy side, the laundry side, the beverage side, the clothing. So as you go and you get to see our customers to help us in also giving us ideas on, oh, this is what we might probably need.
Like many others, Kushabni Moodley took her first steps as an online shopper during the pandemic.
My first experience with online shopping was quite frustrating. I felt that I was losing money because often I'd order goods that weren't, the order wouldn't be completed 100%. And then also in terms of delivery times, even though specific instructions were given, there was really no communication with regards to if the delivery was going to fall outside of work hours or within.
Sorting out these growing pains could dictate which companies emerge from the pandemic as e-commerce leaders and which get left behind.
We've seen a 30 to 40% growth in online sales since the start of lockdown, and that growth pattern is continuing to go on the up and up. We've noticed that people originally were just shopping online because they wanted to stay home and stay safe. But we've noticed more and more now that people who've never ever shopped with us before are shopping with us and now are coming back and continuing to shop with us.
E-commerce accounted for just $1.2 billion of South African retail sales in 2019. This is according to London-based market research firm Euromonitor. That figure is expected to rise this year, with growing demand in the online purchases of goods and services. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
You're watching Africa Live. Coming up after the break. Nigerian filmmaker leverages on technology to reach movie lovers during the coronavirus pandemic.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
As the world increasingly moves many activities online due to the COVID-19 pandemic, one Nigerian filmmaker has organized a virtual film festival. And as CGTN's Deji Badmas reports, the event was well received across the continent.
Welcome to this edition of the African Film Festival.
That's how Kelechi Eke officially declared this year's edition of the Africa Film Festival open, right from the heart of his living room. Eke is the founder and director of this unique film festival, which usually gathers filmmakers from across the world to celebrate and promote African films in the US city of Dallas, where he is based. With COVID-19 restrictions making it hard for participants to be at the annual event, he had to organize it virtually. Using a film streaming service dubbed Rootflakes that he had created for movie distribution and the video conferencing platform Zoom, Eke got the festival going.
Thank God I'm on the technical side as a software engineer. I was able to load all the films on Rootflakes, and the emergence of Zoom came in handy. I was able to integrate Zoom to Rootflakes platform to have all kinds of conferences live with all the filmmakers.
He uploaded 50 films on Rootflakes, all of them selected from hundreds of entries by African filmmakers. And for 5 days, the films were screened alongside other activities like masterclasses, panel sessions, and much more, with producers, directors, and other industry players participating virtually from across the world.
And it was amazing. We found a time that was good for everybody. And filmmakers dialed in from Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, Uganda, Gambia, Egypt, all over. So we were all packed on our Zoom call and having discussions. It worked out great.
The nominees for TAF 2020 Best Original Soundtrack are...
Despite being a virtual film festival, some selected films were still specially screened and nominated for awards, with the winners announced. For instance, this film from Uganda titled Family was voted the winner in the Best Series Award, and the actors comfortably followed proceedings from their home in Kampala.
We are very grateful, very honored. We want to thank the Africa Film Festival for having organized this accolade. Of course, this award means a lot to us as Naruso Films. So we want to thank everybody that worked with us on this project, from the actors to the director, the screenwriters. This award is yours.
By hosting the festival virtually, Eke managed to cut costs by more than a half. But there's still a downside to hosting the event virtually.
What we try to do at every festival is to collaborate in some type of project whereby the filmmakers come together, we pick a script and, make a short film. That's part of our tradition at the African Film Festival. And we were not able to do that this time around.
Eke and his team are hoping that by the next festival, they would revert to the traditional way and have filmmakers physically present at the event. But he says some aspects of the virtual festival will be retained in the future. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Ahead in sports news. IOC and Senegal mutually agreed to postpone Youth Olympic Games until 2026.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
We start in Senegal, where the Youth Olympics set for Dakar in 2022 has been pushed until 2026. The decision comes after Senegal and the International Olympic Committee agreed to postpone the Games due to the coronavirus pandemic. The postponement of Dakar 2022 allows the IOC, the National Olympic Committees and the international federations to better plan their activities, which have been strongly affected by the postponement of the Tokyo Olympic Games. Meanwhile, IOC President Thomas Bach says they are fully committed to staging the Olympic Games in Tokyo next year and will be considering multiple scenarios to ensure safety.
Senegal and the IOC have mutually agreed to postpone the Youth Olympic Games Dakar 2022 to the year 2026. This agreement was approved today by the IOC Executive Board and will be submitted to the IOC session on a Friday for ratification. The proposal for a postponement was made by the President of Senegal, Macky Sall, in a telephone conversation with me 2 days ago. And I welcomed this move by President Macky Sall. And after an in-depth discussion on the subject, we decided then to establish as the new date 2026.
The schedule for the 2022 Football World Cup in Qatar has been revealed. Fans will be able to watch an unprecedented 4 games a day